Hi, and welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're going to be diving into the magical world of embossing folders. I've got some tips and tricks that are going to make your projects just pop, and your friends are going to be thinking that you have some sort of crafting superpowers. These things are so easy to do and really will elevate your embossing. So some tips and tricks that I think that you'll find useful. I know I did. My name is Julia. I'm with Julia Sue Stamping. I'm passionate about stamping, coloring, paper crafting, making cards. Most of all, I'm passionate about sharing the fun of how to do all of that with you. So again, I'm really glad that you're here today. I live in Northeast Ohio. I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. I have a lot of details, measurements, everything used in these projects today listed on my blog, so please be sure you check it out. So I think we should go ahead and get started. How about you? Now, first up, we're going to be talking about getting a crisp, defined emboss that's going to make you go, wow. Well, here's a little secret. It's a spritz of water. I use the water spritzer. Stampin' Up! Sells these in packages of 2. And this is fantastic for exactly this. The embossing folder I used for this technique is the Dotted Circles 3D embossing folder, and Stampin' Up! Has been calling a lot of their embossing folders 3D embossing folders. The difference between the 3D embossing folder and the regular embossing folder is that a 3D embossing folder, no matter how you put your paper, there will be some images that are debossed and some that are embossed. The debossed means the part that goes down into the paper, and embossed is the part that goes up from the paper. So the 3D folders have a little of both in every single one of its folders when you put it in. That means it's also thicker. It is a thicker embossing folder. And if you have, like I did for many years, a Big Shot by Sizzix, it's a little more difficult to put these 3D folders through. You have to figure out some kind of way to shim it and some things like that to do. And with the Stampin' Up! Cut and Emboss machine, here's a mini Stampin' Up! Cut and Emboss machine. They come in 2 different sizes. There's a mini and a regular sized one, and it will come with the base and the embossing folder top. There are only about 4 or so that go embossing folders that go in the mini. It's really good. The mini is very good for the dies and things like that. Right? Back to the technique. The best way to do this one to make sure you have a crisp and defined emboss is to just spritz it lightly with the water, and your cardstock it's like giving it a little mini spa treatment. You just lightly mist the water. You don't drown it because we're not having a pool party here. And then you put it into the folder when it has been dampened. Put it through the folder, run it through in the embossing machine, and you'll get a very, very crisp, well-defined emboss. The reason being is that moisture helps the paper fibers relax, and that way you get a deeper, more detailed emboss. It's easy peasy, and your cardstock is going to look fabulous and super fancy. And here's a card I made using that tip. So you can see how deeply embossed this is, and it's really a showstopper. It makes everyone loves texture on the cards, so great way to get that. All right, that is tip number 1. The second one we're going to cover really quickly is a letterpress effect. And for this one, I wanted to share with you the Eyelet 3D embossing folder. So again, it's one of those that both sides have a little bit of emboss and deboss. So you kind of have to choose which side you want to do this on. But I'm going to bring in a piece of grid paper here. And you do a letterpress effect that makes your projects look really sophisticated. And open up the ink pad, and this is where the magic happens. You ink up the debossing side, and so there is a side of this that's flatter, and that's the side I ink up. So you ink up the debossed side, the recessed design for those of you keeping track at home. And then when you have it inked up enough that you are happy with it, and you might have to experiment and do it a couple of times to see how much ink you want to have on. But when you feel like it's pretty good, you put your paper in, sandwich it in there, and you run it through the machine. And voila! You get instant letterpress chic. So this is pretty snazzy. It's going to have your friends asking, how did you do that? You get the color on there. It has, sometimes it looks like you made a handmade card. It will have more on some areas, less on others. And personally, I really like that. That's fine with me. But some people may want to have it more defined. This piece I worked really hard and got it very dark. And on the one with the card I'm going to show you, I did that as well, but you can see I also have some lighter areas, and it just adds to the card. The next technique I'm going to share with you is the highlighting raised areas. You're just adding some flair by giving your embossing just a little extra pizzazz. The one I'm going to show you with this is the Xenia 3D embossing folder. Again, it's a 3D embossing folder, so you kind of have to decide which side you would want to be using. And I spritzed my paper with my spritzer and then put it into the embossing folder, ran it through, and came up with this with the raised edges. Do you see how that works? So you kind of have to decide which side you want to do. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in some blueberry bushel and a blending brush. Now you can use a sponge dauber, you could use an ink pad and just do direct ink to paper, or you can use a blending brush like I'm going to do. And I'm going to take off some of that color, and I'm just going to lightly blend. Do you see how the raised areas are really getting the ink? It just looks so cool. It adds color, it adds depth, and it makes the design stand out even more. It's like a little bit of makeup or something for your cardstock, right? Just a little touch here, a little touch of it there. You can go subtle or you can go bold. You could use metallic even, or so you could use like a metal looking ink, or you could have it be matte, and that's how it looks in action. How cool is that? Just highlighting it. So here is a card I made using this technique. And again, you can see the raised edges. It stands out just a little bit more against the background here. Isn't that cool? It's like your embossing got a makeover. Last but not least, we are going to emboss the Designer Series paper using the Fern 3D embossing folder. This really is a fun technique to use. The DSP, the Designer Series paper, and I'm using the Full of Life in this example here. It already has some really awesome patterns to it, hasn't it? And then when you add embossing, it's like a double whammy of creativity. All you do is cut your paper to the size that you want, pop it into the embossing folder, and run it through your machine. The texture and the patterns combined are going to make your project just pop like popcorn in the microwave. It's so cool looking and it feels amazing. It's one of those that's just so striking when you see it in person. Your projects are going to be the talk of the crafting town. Here's a card that I used with that technique. I've got it all embossed with the Fern 3D embossing folder. So, as you can see, these are really fun tips and great ways to up your embossing game. How cool is that? Oh, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you found these tips and tricks as fun and as helpful as I did. So if you enjoyed the video, please be sure you give it a thumbs up. And remember to check out my blog because I'll have a lot more details and the measurements listed there. Please be sure you subscribe to the channel of my YouTube channel, and I appreciate all of your support. It means so much. If you already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, that's okay. But if you don't and you decide that you'd like to use me as your demonstrator, I appreciate your support and I'll do everything I can to help you and to help you with your crafting. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below for me. I take a look and I will answer you. Also, if you have a favorite one of the tips that I shared with you, let me know in the comments. And if you have any embossing tips that you'd like to share, please leave those. Happy crafting, and I'll see you later. Keep embossing. Thank you again. Bye-bye.